Startup have an interesting business model. The startup's business model, well, our startup's Biofab. So Biofab's business model has a very core commercial model and also R&D model. But for
Okay.
the R&D model to work, the commercial model has to work first, and
Yeah.
then to have a percentage of the revenue incoming to feed into the R&D model.
So today we have Jessica. Her reason for starting a PhD was very different from what we usually hear. So she actually co-founded a startup before her PhD, and she started the PhD, or she decided to do a PhD just to deepen her knowledge about the mission of the startup. And actually her whole research is centered around the circular economy and how the nature might hold the blueprint to a sustainable future. So today we actually talked to her about how she balances, the academia and entrepreneurship and both the worlds together, and how she switches her mindset from being a scientist to being the entrepreneur that she is. So let's go. Hi Jessica, how are you?
Good. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for joining in and being part of the podcast. So, can you introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, sure. Very briefly, I'm Jess. I am a PhD candidate at the University of Auckland. Just submitted my thesis, and otherwise, I'm also the CSO, Chief Science Officer slash co-founder, co-founding team member of BioFab here in New Zealand.
Wow. And you just handed in over your thesis like
Yeah,
you
like
are nearing the fence.
yeah, just 2 weeks ago. We'll see how the defense go. Still a couple of months or more than that to kind of wait for actually defending. But yeah, looking forward to that.
Okay, that seems interesting. And like I want to ask, why did you do a PhD? Like you had a passion for research,
Yeah.
which can be first thing. Or is it was like, okay, after masters, oh, let's go for another degree, and that has to be a PhD. How did it go?
Oh, I mean, it's all a little bit of serendipity, I suppose.
Okay.
There's a lot of component. Well, I always wanted to do a PhD, but on what I don't know until maybe particularly in my say bachelor's, third and fourth year of bachelor's or fourth year, our honors degree. I came up with the idea and really passionate about it. Absolutely. I was young. I was a little bit naive, and I really want to get into something I'm absolutely passionate about. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I get to like translate my idea into a PhD project and just like
Okay.
completely focus on it. That was back in 2018, I suppose.
Okay.
But in between, I did do a master's that has nothing to do with my PhD at the moment, and
Okay.
then after that, had opportunities to network with people in the industry and get to know my supervisors and so in serendipity, people and time matches that got me into this PhD itself. Yeah.
So you chose your PhD field prior, you thought of even joining a PhD? So you were
I Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I grew up with an Asian background, so it's all.
okay.
I grew up from Taiwan, so it's quite strict background of just studying back there. So in my head, I was just pretty good at studying, and came to New Zealand when I was 16. I was like, yeah, I'm still good at studying, and the easiest way if I want to continue on studying is all the way to PhD, and then I'll think about what I want to do afterwards. But in between there were a lot of things that happened, but that is always a pathway that I considered. Not
Yeah.
necessarily think that I can do it, but it's something that in my head I was like, if I'm good enough, I want to do it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And you mentioned that you were back in Taiwan since
yeah,
your schooling and everything was in Taiwan. So why
yeah.
did you move to New Zealand? So why New Zealand was the choice for you?
Oh, very candid answer is it's one of the cheapest option I got. Yeah. My parents was thinking that if I can go somewhere overseas that's a little bit more have a different way of education, I suppose. I grew up just highly affected by Western education and I think a little bit differently, or maybe because myself as quite neurodiverse, I decided that, hey, the standard Eastern education way is not really for me. But I went through however much I could, and my parents had this opportunity to send me overseas, but I also don't want to spend all their money. So I picked one of the a safe country to go into and one of cheaper countries. And also family friend have been through the process. So we're like,
Okay.
okay, cool. Yeah, that's helpful to see how someone else do it. And mom had a little bit more confidence into sending me here. So that's,
Okay.
yeah.
But in the process, as you said, that it is more cheaper. So is it because in the PhDs we are getting stipends? So how do you say like it's cheaper? And also, when you were planning your move, did you, was it like a planned move to New Zealand only because it's cheaper, or you also applied to other schools, maybe in US or somewhere else? And or you applied to any other schools in New Zealand itself, and why did you choose the one you are in?
Oh, cool. So a bit of a context. I came to New Zealand when I was 16, so I came here for high school. So at
Oh,
that point, we thought that is a little bit of a jumping board for me to be more suited in an environment that's safer, presumably safer. We
yes.
didn't know about New Zealand that much. We thought it's safe. We thought it's cheaper, and the environment that's the host family. I was in a host family.
Yeah.
It was just like a whole package of like, okay, so I can live here and just focus on education sort of thing. Um, but then back then I also tried to do SAT to go to US as well.
Okay.
Half of my family lives in US, so it kind of like was a bit of a natural progression that, oh yeah, it makes sense. The next steps go to US. I did SAT as well, then not too bad. But at that point I haven't finished my high school, but so I decided to continue and maybe went to New Zealand to finish my high school degree and then do SAT to go to America. Um, and again, this is in serendipity. I did a Cambridge level instead.
Oh,
Because part of New Zealand system, you can choose either NCEA or IB, or is the IB degree, or the other one's Cambridge system, which is the more Commonwealth system.
okay.
Um, and after finishing a year, I realized I have enough grade to just go to it university in New Zealand, and I absolutely got in love with this place
Yeah.
back then. The idea of there's a lot of adventure I could do here. I'm a very outdoorsy person. There's a lot of mountain,
Yes.
beaches, river, and absolutely amazing and beautiful. So I decided actually this is for me. And in the sense of biotechnology, back then when I was a youngling, because I want to specialize in somewhere in biology or biotechnology. And New Zealand's such an agricultural and dairy-based industry, like it's such a big industry in New Zealand. I thought, okay, I see some overlap and I see the lifestyle here, and I got friends here, and you know what? I'm gonna give it a go. Um, I have enough grades. I'm gonna skip year 13. I'm gonna go to uni. I save my parents some money. All right, this makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of planning. There's a lot of, oh yeah, this just makes sense that
Yeah.
in line with what I'm about to do. So
Yes.
yeah.
And you mentioned that you when you actually was when actually you first came across a subject that you were doing PhD on, you started looking for people, you started networking with people and meeting people from industry. So did you also try, or I don't know if in New Zealand you have PhD in industry, so by any chance you explored that option as well?
Yeah, so in New Zealand, this would have been back then. There's a system set up under a organization that actually, if an industry or a company is interested in investing in their R&D, they can recruit students to go on, and the organization will give out some money to top up the students, the stipend and scholarship, in order for the student to work with the industry to
Yeah.
move forward. Um, Back then it makes sense to have that. I didn't directly follow that system, but the idea of that makes sense. So I kind of just have a chat to my company and see if they're happy with that. I got awarded a scholarship myself through University of
Wow.
Auckland, through masters. So, and then talking to my supervisors, they're in support of this whole initiative. So they're like, okay, let's give it a go, even though it's not through that organization that I was talking about. But when my own companies, the startup, and also my supervisor, who was also my master supervisor, who was very commercial minded and very open minded about applied a PhD on applied science. Um, and as New Zealand moved forward, there is a bit of a focus on using science for innovation in the innovation space. So I decided, yep, this kind of makes sense moving forward. I will also, being an impatient person, I also would like to see the science I'm doing has immediate impact to,
Okay.
yeah. So that in my head makes sense. Not every that this is not immediately for everyone, but back then there was a lot of just push for commercialization, just with my background, how I studied, and with everyone supporting that kind of system. So I decided that's my route. Yeah.
I mean, you just mentioned about your startup, and you also mentioned that your science has a direct and immediate impact.
Yeah.
So basically, we know that in PhD we do very fundamental research.
Mm.
So all the research that we do is not really, translating into a drug or any kind of therapy immediately. It might have an impact, but not just now. So how do you actually come to this conclusion? Okay, I want to do a PhD, but it has to have an immediate impact, because this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
kind of a new thinking, because we start with the PhDs, we start with projects, but we never think about, okay, we want to see an immediate use of what we are doing. So how do you actually came to that?
Okay. So I think this is with my early exposure towards the idea of commercialization back when I was in perhaps in my bachelor days. I did a bachelor degree that's biotechnology, and one of the few papers that made us focus on is in business and finances and marketing, etc. And being that space just make me realize that science just for immediate impact and for people to understand real impact of science, that part of it is still important, right? Um, so that was my first exposure around then. But still, I, as a researcher, understand the importance of fundamental science.
Yes.
Going into PhD, to get into applied science, you have to, well, even before going to PhD, you have to have the idea and understand the importance of that already. Otherwise, the setting up of the PhD project will be very different to the
Yes.
commercial route. So the being exposed to that idea is very important prior to getting into PhD. Unfortunately, that you can't just go into PhD. If you commit to a fundamental science PhD, that is totally fine, but just at the same time developed translatable skills that is in line to what your PhD can also do. So I think that is the important part if you immediately didn't get into applied science. Yeah.
That seems actually very intriguing, because I guess 90% of the PhDs are fundamental science PhDs, and they're not like immediate impact PhDs, like their
Yeah,
project
yeah.
in immediate impact. Also, you mentioned that about the startup, from actually where you work, and you applied with a grant with your current PI. So you co-found this startup, right?
Yeah, so
And
pretty much. Yeah.
yes, and it is very fascinating. So you co-founded a startup, and co-founded a startup before you actually started a PhD, right?
Yeah.
And it was maybe in your master days.
Uh, right after my master's days, yeah.
So did you take some time off to start the startup and take it to a level from where you can apply for a PhD from it? And in New Zealand, I don't know what is the process of actually registering a startup, and how you can also apply for a PhD with a scientist
Mhm.
to just for a PhD for your own, as because you're also the co-founder of that startup.
Yeah.
And does the name of the startup gets together with the name of the PI in the grant, or the grant is just given to the university? Like, how does that work?
Okay, cool. I think let's dissect it down to the context, and then I'll give you how we kind of set it up, I suppose. Um, so yes, the starting of the PhD, before I started my PhD, I'm actually just wanting to focus on the startup like directly and completely. And then after setting up the R&D project slash program actually of the startup, there was a lot of fundamental questions that I was really curious and wanting to find out. But in between, there's also important questions of functionalities of I'm in material science, so how the materials will actually well, how important are those functionalities to our customers? So there's the gap of, okay, there are fundamental questions that we're trying to get at, and there is also customer stuff that the customer wants, and we have to essentially meet in order to be able to sell to the market, right? So I found a gap between these two, and to to be able to complete the both, I suggested to my founders saying that as a long-term goal, what if I make the R&D project? And currently, because we don't have substantial funding to go into R&D, I got awarded a PhD project of a or stipend under my university to go into doctoral. Like I haven't applied yet, but I know my grades can be able to get the scholarship. So was like, why don't we utilize that and set up a long-term goal of where we need to be after 4 years, and then design the project to meet the gap that I just
Yeah.
talked about, right? So
Yeah.
fundamental questions and also where the customer wants in terms of material functionalities. So I'm like, okay, if we have this mindset going forward, then I am investing my time and my effort to go and get this and give the essentially the startup 4 years time to also get there to also commercialize what I want to do with this material. Um, the startup have an interesting business model. The startup's business model, well, I'll startup's Biofab. So Biofab's business model has a very core commercial model and also R&D model. But for
Okay.
the R&D model to work, the commercial model has to work first, and
Yeah.
then to have a percentage of the revenue incoming to feed into the R&D model. And while that commercial model is not up and running yet, and that runway was around 1 year, and I was like, well, I don't see this going anywhere
Yeah.
so far because there's a lot of effort needing to go in. And that point, there's a lot of customers that we need to actually get and investors and lead investors. So I decided to just pretty much tell my founders, hey, well, there's a fund, well, to get me working in my PhD stuff. If you are willing to put in material costs and also some other consumable costs, then we can probably negotiate with the university saying that, hey, maybe the background IP belongs to this company. And between me, this company, and my supervisors, and while each of us will own our own IP coming in. And because most of the IP currently at that point going to the PhD comes in from Biofab, and Biofab will own most of the IP. Well, pretty
Yeah.
much all the IP at that point because that's when the IP comes in. So at that point we're like, okay, so we are gonna talk to university. There's a department within University of Auckland called the Tech Transfer Office, Uni Services. They are the commercial department that kind of looks after a lot of contracts and a lot of commercial opportunities for university researchers. And they also look at industry contracts in terms
Yeah.
of any industry wanting to work with universities. So talk to them and then negotiated essentially an IP agreement that everyone's happy with. And then from them, we're like, okay, so having this agreement, everyone's happy, we can move on, and have a material transfer agreement as well. So besides the IP agreement, we have a material transfer agreement.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we can start the PhD.
Oh, this seems very interesting and new because I have never heard of it that, you found a startup and then you found like a potential supervisor for yourself and then you actually come to common terms. You come to
Yeah.
a contract and basically that is even fascinating because now your PhD is very much goal driven. So yeah, now that's my next question. Does having a goal-driven PhD helped you a lot to keep more focused on what you want to do? Or is it like the normal ones, like all over the place?
Oh, huh. I think it's still um there's a core focus, but to be fair, they're still a bit all over the place sometimes, just because there's commercial interest and there's, especially it's 4 years, so there's a lot of commercial interest where my startup would be like, oh Jess, we need you to present here, to present there, come to talk to those customers, come to that customers. So in my head, I'm just there. Can be a little bit distracted sometimes, being borderline ADHD myself. So I was like, yeah, very much distracted. It's very the startup world's mindset is very different from the academia mindset. And I need to, in that 4 years, balance that really well. The mindset particularly is quite it just pulls me in the opposite direction sometimes.
Okay.
I found that a lot. In the commercial mindset, I shouldn't share a lot of things. I'm not allowed
Yes.
to share a lot of things because of commercial interests, IP protection, and all that. And with academia, I teach. I also teach at universities. I'm very passionate about teaching. I'm really passionate about sharing ideas. So these completely just kind of like pull me the opposite direction, and I often have to do like a physical little thing where I'm like, okay, I'm putting my commercial hat on and to go into a business function. And where I go into conferences, I put my academic hat on. So it's
Okay.
a very interesting situation. Yeah.
And you mentioned that as you are a part of that startup, you also have to go to many business meetings and stuff. So, till now, in the 4 years of your PhD, the research that you have done, have you seen an immediate impact of it already?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of interesting things that we can probably protect already. Well, what is the most interesting thing? Something that I've done, or I made a hypothesis
Okay.
maybe in 2017, 2018. This is just an idea. It was just like me still studying, and then I was like, I just want to know whether this is true or not. And then after my PhD, I can confirm that yes, I just proved my hypothesis, and I'm absolutely thrilled about it. And this is not just about commercial side, it's just my personal thing. I'm like,
Yeah.
I answer my own question sort of thing. So my cat is just a bit nosy. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, but that was the hypothesis you had when you were starting your PhD project, when you wanted to
Well,
invest.
this is my bachelor's actually. I was just like, oh, I'm just
Okay.
yeah, this is completely out of my own interest and curiosity. And turns out just sliding it into my PhD actually just makes the whole thing more interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so basically you made a hypothesis during your bachelor's and you
Yeah.
got to proving it in your
Your
PhD.
PhD. Yeah.
But what I was actually wondering is that since you are at the interface of academic institution and the industry, let's say.
Okay.
So when
Yeah.
you say that you wanted to see an immediate impact of what you are doing, so while you were doing R&D,
Mhm.
so there were there might be have multiple milestones when you know that
Yeah.
okay, this was the thing and this was happening. So have you ever seen it translating it to a real use already?